I'm Dustin Grinnell, and this is Curiously. Ever since I can remember, I've been fascinated by space. When I was a kid, I had a poster of the Eagle Nebula on my bedroom wall. I had a telescope that I used to study the moon, and I was obsessed with books and movies that brought space and astronomy to life. My favorite movie is Contact, based on the novel by the astronomer and science communicator Carl Sagan. The main character, played by Jodie Foster, was inspired by the American astronomer Vera Rubin. My interest in all things space really took off in high school when I was at a friend's house and his dad gave him a stack of books, hoping they might pull him away from video games and spark a new interest. My friend wasn't into them. They were about space, time, cosmology, and Einstein's equations, with titles like The Curvature of Space-Time and Simply Einstein. But I was fascinated. These books felt like they might contain answers to the biggest questions about reality and our place in the cosmos. I asked if I could borrow them, and he said yes. Over the next couple of weeks, I read every single one. That moment marked the beginning of a lifelong interest in space, cosmology, and the origins of life, an interest that stayed with me into adulthood. Even just a couple of years ago, during orientation for a new job, we were asked to bring something meaningful to share. I brought 3 images: a picture of Earth from the moon, a picture of Earth from Mars, and a third image from the edge of our galaxy, taken by the Voyager spacecraft, where Earth appears as a tiny speck, obscured by a beam of light. The director of the organization, a bit dismissively, said, "You really like space." I replied, "I like perspective," because that's what thinking about our place in the cosmos gives us: perspective. Not just on our own lives and problems, but on our entire species. Carl Sagan reminded us of this over and over again, especially in his iconic pale blue dot speech. When you see how small and fragile our planet is in the vastness of the universe, it humbles you. It makes you feel small and insignificant, but also, paradoxically, special. So when I had a trip planned to Baltimore to read a story I'd written for John Hopkins' Tendon magazine, I decided to reach out to Dan Coe at the Space Telescope Science Institute. He seemed open to speaking with journalists, so I figured, why not? And to my surprise and excitement, he said yes. Not only that, he invited me to see where the magic happens, where teams of scientists and engineers operate the Hubble and James Webb space telescopes. What followed was a 2.5-hour conversation that moved from a walk and talk, from mission control to Dan's office overlooking a bright green forest, and finally to a local pub for lunch and beers. In our wide-ranging conversation, we covered everything from the origins of the universe to the search for life, to the role of AI in astronomy and parenting, and so much more. I got to ask some of the big questions that have been on my mind for years, not just about space telescopes, but about what life may look like on other planets. Would it be microbes or something we can't even comprehend? I asked him what dark matter might be, and he shared some of the best current theories. But perhaps the biggest question I asked was about meaning, how to find significance in a universe so vast, where we seem so small. Dan's perspective? Even if our existence is brief and may not hold intrinsic meaning, he believes, echoing the old phrase, "It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." I love that. Before we get into the episode, I want to say one more thing about Dan. He's, if I can use an old-timey word, a genuinely swell guy. More specifically, he's kind. And that was a theme throughout our conversation. From the way scientists collaborate rather than compete, to his hope that as our species matures, we might figure out how to be kinder to one another. He even hopes AI can learn kindness, and that any extraterrestrial species we may one day meet can too. Having worked in corporate environments where I've seen people be downright vicious in their little status games, I found Dan's focus on kindness incredibly refreshing and inspiring. In his office, Dan shared a line from the book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie McKeesy. In the book, the mole asks the boy, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The boy replies, "Kind." That simple exchange reflects a theme in our conversation, that kindness to others and to ourselves is one of the most meaningful things we can strive for. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and as always, if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out. I'm walking on the Johns Hopkins University campus right now, making my way to the Space Telescope Science Institute, where I'm going to meet Dan Coe, an astronomer who studies distant galaxies. And he has been generous enough to spend the morning with me, talking about his work, talking about the Hubble telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope, both of which are controlled by the Space Institute. So I'm going into the Institute now, and we're going to tour the facility. We're going to see his workspace, his lab. We're going to see mission control, where these two space telescopes are controlled from the facility. So without further ado, here we go. So Dan Coe, thank you for joining me on my podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for joining me here at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore.
Yeah, I guess maybe to start, we're standing in the cafe of the Institute right now. Can you kind of like orient the listener, or like where we are and what the Institute does and who kind of works here, who's around us?
Right, so we're in Baltimore on the Johns Hopkins campus, and we've been here for over 30 years, close to 40 now, running the Hubble telescope for many years. And I mean, most people even in Baltimore don't realize that we run the Hubble right here in Baltimore.
I didn't know, yeah.
Right, and now also the James Webb Space Telescope. Mission control is just upstairs. We could head up there in a little bit, and you could see that, but this is where it all happens.
Amazing. We're in the building where two space telescopes are being controlled.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome.
And some of that is also down at NASA Goddard for Hubble, but for JWST, it's all right upstairs.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can just walk around and we'll see what we see.
Yeah, you're lucky. There's actually a conference in town. This is our annual spring symposium. So there's hundreds of astronomers from around the world who have come to talk about interstellar things, gas and dust, and so things that we're so specialized. So this is stuff outside of my expertise, but that's what they're all here working on right now.
Wow, this happens every spring?
Yeah, and they pick different topics each time, and that's what they're doing this time.
The topic is interstellar?
Right.
Okay. Are you presenting or anything?
No, so I'm not involved with this one. I've been involved with other ones, and we've also proposed to have distant galaxies be one of the topics. And in fact, it was on galaxies more broadly last year. But so I'm not involved in this one.
Cool. And so where are we heading to?
So right now we're going up. We started on the second floor. That's where you come in, and this is the third floor. It's one floor up, and we're heading over to JWST mission control right now. And a lot of these offices were being used during those exciting first few months of launch and commissioning and getting the telescope all ready. And over here is the actual mission control. We're not going to go all the way inside, but we're going to look in through the glass.
Sure.
And sometimes there's meetings in this room, so we'll be a bit quiet.
Okay, of course.
In here, through the glass, you can see.
Oh, wow. So we're looking at something that looks like what you'd see on Apollo 13 while they're talking. While they're talking to things in space, astronauts and space instruments.
So this room was very busy during launch and commissioning, but these days there's just a few people who keep things running. In fact, we only talk to the JWST a few times a day.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's a lot more low key now. But if you saw any of the coverage from TV, this was a really exciting place and time. And both in that control room and then all around here, they did a lot of the interviews and the broadcasts and things.
So the JWST is a million miles out in space right now, and it's sitting there in the vacuum of space taking pictures, and we're talking to it through this room.
Right. So there's the Deep Space Network. There's these 3 large antennas down on Earth that communicate with it, depending on how the Earth's rotated and when each one gets to talk to it.
Yeah.
And then that all comes here. The instructions of what to observe gets loaded up big chunks at a time. So a lot of the time we're not in contact, and it can kind of proceed doing its thing up there.
Okay, so you kind of, people have programs that they get approved, and
Right.
like that packet of data is sent up there for it to run automatically on those commands?
Exactly.
Okay.
We have 800 people that work here, including a bunch of people that work to make the schedule, to try to fit everything in. It's like this huge puzzle where they try to, pack and make sure it's really efficient in terms of how it's observing all of our great, exciting targets.
Wow. And these are astronomers sitting at the tables, or are they?
Now, these will be other people, I forget what they're called, maybe flight engineers or schedulers. They're, helping to run things. And, of course, it's all electronic and done remotely these days. And I couldn't tell you what most of those things are on the screen in there. But,
Cool. And is the Hubble mission control close by as well?
So Hubble was here, kind of on again, off again, and these days it's down at NASA Goddard.
Oh, okay.
It's been there most of the time.
Okay.
During Hubble's lifetime. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for showing me this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. Sometimes people get selfies by the NASA meatball or the little JBST model we have over here. And,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this is a full-scale replica of one of the mirrors.
Yeah.
I don't know any more details to share with you, but that's to kind of give you an idea. There's 18 of these mirrors, and so altogether it's 20 feet tall.
Wow.
The whole so think like a 2-story building.
And I in doing some of my reading, you said there was like 20,000 or so people
Right.
working on this one project. It's really
Right.
a feat of engineering and coordination.
Right. I credit Jane Rigby, who won the National Medal of Freedom for her work on this project. She reminded us how many people have been working on this for decades to make this incredible discovery machine that we can look back in time, billions of years, and discover our origins. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for all that work.
And really just getting it into space was, I remember following that a couple of years ago. What was your 300 or so points of failure?
Right.
Any one of those
Right.
things could have sunk the whole project.
Right. Yeah. Failure was not an option for any one of those, and we were all, on the edge of our seat, and it all worked, and it's working even better than we dreamed. It's so exciting.
Yeah. And we'll have 15 years with it. Is that the?
Fingers crossed it could go for 20, 30. I mean, the sky's
You
not
never know
even
with these things.
Yeah.
I remember the Mars rover. It was supposed to get what was it, some months or something, and then it had 15. It was Curiosity, I think, or
Okay.
Our Opportunity.
Yeah.
It was only supposed to be up there a few months, and something for years and years.
I guess they always design these things to, make sure, they have some criteria that they have to last a certain number of months, but they always hope they'll go longer. And we got a perfect launch from ESA and the Ariane 5 rocket, and so that conserved fuel to the point where we were hoping for. I think the requirement was 5 years, and then we were hoping for maybe 10, but now people are talking about 20 or more. Sort of like the Hubble Space Telescope is now 35 years old and still going strong.
Amazing. And I'm sure we have 15, 20, 30 years of work for it to do. We have plenty of projects.
Yeah. Every year we probably have about 5 years worth to do. It's so much.
I'm curious about just the curation process, what projects get picked and why, and how does that process work?
Yeah, and we could wander a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. So all of that happens here at the Space Telescope Science Institute. There's people submit their proposals, and it's the most in-demand telescope. There's I think it was well over 2,000 proposals, and those all get sent here, and then we bring in a bunch of other astronomers from around the world to debate over them and rank them, and so they pick the best ones, and it's a hard process. I mean, I think it's like 10% of the proposals get accepted.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're chosen, the ones that are chosen for what reason would you say? The biggest questions, the most leading edge questions? Yeah,
I can think of a few reasons why, we were fortunate and ours got accepted, and but it's always tricky. There's so many good ideas, and so the ones that don't quite make the cut, we resubmit those, and because they were close. And but yeah, they're meant to be exciting programs that are, or sometimes boring programs, but that are helping us to learn things, and that they have to be well designed and well planned out, both technically and in terms of the science they're going to achieve. So yeah, it's always tricky, and it's such a hard job for the people asked to review all of them, and then inevitably, most of the time it comes back and you don't get accepted, and you'll say, well, and maybe they didn't really understand the proposal, and that because they were so busy and had so many things to figure out. So it's tough.
Yeah, sure. So we just walked through a hallway from Mission Control, past a bunch of offices, and now we're standing at a where we are second floor, and we're looking out at a replica of Hubble.
Right. Yeah. So this is, it makes me, kind of feel like the astronauts a little bit, just who put their lives on the line and did, so much work servicing Hubble for all these years. Hubble was in it's in a lower Earth orbit, so the astronauts were able to go up and install new cameras and fix things when they needed to. JWST is a lot further out, a million miles, like you said, so there's no plans to send anybody that far. And
we can't work on that.
Right. I think, even if you wanted to, I think it would take a month, and there's no real way to do that. Although if it came down to it, they say, well, we would go, but we don't really have a good way of doing that. So yeah, JWST had to work the first time. Like you said, there were all these points of failure. We couldn't have any issues like we did with Hubble in the beginning. The mirror was out of focus, and we were able to basically put glasses on it. We couldn't have that kind of thing happen with JWST either, but what we did is we actually made all the mirrors deformable, so they all bend. And so they're actually able to, every once in a while they get ever so slightly out of focus, and they're able to refocus it. And in the very beginning, after launch, they had to figure out how to point them all and to get them into focus, and they do an amazing job with that too. I mean, the images are actually better than we hoped for, than they designed for. I mean, it's just so good.
But they're different telescopes, right?
Oh, yeah.
They see things at different wavelengths, is that right? So they have different things they can investigate?
Right. They're very complementary, and so they're still working, and sometimes we even have calls for proposals where people can use both, either at the same time or maybe one after the other, to study the same objects. So JWST is a lot larger. Hubble's mirror is 8 feet across, so think like floor to ceiling. And then JWST is 20 feet, more like a 2-story building. So it's able to see better images, in more detail. But then Hubble goes more into the ultraviolet, which is light that JWST can't see. JWST goes more into the infrared, which is important for the kind of work that I do, studying the distant universe.
Yeah.
But they're very complementary, and and they also overlap in the middle. So the colors of light that we can see, they can both see.
And it must be for you who worked on Hubble for so long and took pictures, and then now working on JWST and doing that comparison, that before and after. I understand there's like that. Well, whenever I see you on TV or YouTube, there's a picture you place in the background, and it's distant galaxies, right? And you can show that comparison between Hubble and JWST, and there's a resolution difference, a huge one. And I understand it had a big impact on you.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. I got to work on one of the very first images that came out from JWST.
Wow.
And it was actually a picture that I took with Hubble of this massive galaxy cluster that's magnifying the distant universe behind it. And, when I got to see that first JWST image, I mean, I just wept. I mean, it was so beautiful. People had simulated what we expected these images to look like. We just didn't expect... we could never simulate all that level of detail and all these tiny features that popped out, and some types of galaxies that we hadn't even dreamed of. There's a few that, these little red dots came into view, and you said, who ordered that? And all these little dots, these tiny little star clusters in the early universe that, it just, it was amazing. And so I told all my astronomer, I was sworn to secrecy, but I told all my astronomer friends that, this is going to blow your mind.
Right.
And even preparing you, it's still going to blow your mind. It's just that amazing.
Yeah, it's like when I was flying over here from Boston, I flew at night, and I had a window seat, and I looked down, and you can fly over New York City and all the cities. You see all these lights and all these blinking things and headlights from cars, and really I was like, my eyes were completely saturated with interesting things, flitting from one thing. It's almost like these pictures, as really there's a lifetime of study in the picture. Like, what's that? What's this? What's that? What's this?
Yeah, and like looking at the Earth at night, you see these little dots, and you don't see the rest of the Earth. I mean, there's all these parts of it. There's, in space, there's dark matter, and there's just gas and other things, So you're kind of getting a tip of the iceberg, even with Hubble and JWST combined. You're seeing now you're seeing most of the stars, but what about all the gas and stuff? And those can see those too to some degree. But we have other ways of seeing the dark matter, and
Yeah, and it's probably a good time. At least some point we should talk about your technique of seeing these distant objects, the gravitational lensing, and you spoke about it. There's clusters of galaxies, and these clusters warp space-time, and then it warps the light that goes around it, and it gives us a cosmic magnification almost. Right.
These massive galaxy clusters bend space-time according to Einstein's relativity, and then the light behind it follows these bends in space. Einstein didn't think we would necessarily even be able to see it. It's a smaller effect for galaxies, but once you get to galaxy clusters, you see how much the light is bent, and you see the distant galaxies are magnified, so you can see them and study them in more detail. You also see multiple images of them as the light takes multiple paths around these galaxy clusters. So the screen keeps popping up some of the beautiful images we've had from Hubble and JWST over the years.
And we're seeing the gravitational lensing.
Yeah.
It's as the kind of like a streak.
Yeah. You see, we call them these arcs. These lens galaxies are really stretched out often in one direction, and that's how we're able to see all the details in the galaxy down to individual star clusters and even individual stars.
And you're not worried about distortion? You can edit that out, or?
We worry about it. And some people worry about it more than others. But there's a bunch of folks who've been working on it for a long time, and we've gotten pretty good at it's like a big puzzle, and we're able to reconstruct. Where is all the dark matter? For the most part, it follows the light that you see. So you see this galaxy cluster with all of these big yellow balls in it. These galaxies, they're elliptical galaxies. So they don't look like our Milky Way, which is this majestic spiral. And it's, our Milky Way was left alone, and it makes this nice spiral pattern. But in the galaxy cluster, it's a bit more, tumultuous, and they've all kind of interacted to the point where there are these older yellow galaxies. And so where you see those, that's also where the dark matter is for the most part. But you don't know how much, and there's also a bunch of it that's kind of scattered about. But we do this modeling, and we're able to reproduce the observed lensing and where these magnified galaxies appear and how they're stretched out and stuff. And so we get pretty good at that. And then once you have that, you can reconstruct how the galaxy looks and sort of piece it back together and say, all right, well, it would have been really small, and then you can kind of figure out, all right, well, how much mass and light is actually in that galaxy.
Yeah. So in terms of the galaxies that you see, 13 billion years into the past, their structures are different than the ones we see just near us, and even in our own galaxy, right? They're like a little bit more like amorphous, like not as, because it's early times.
Yeah, and that was one of the coolest thing that Hubble brought us, was like for the Hubble Deep Field, for example. I mean, every Hubble image is about the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length. Okay. A really small piece of the sky. And then when you stare deeply enough, you see thousands of galaxies, and they all pop into view. And that was one of the first things I did as a grad student right here at Hopkins in Baltimore. Hubble is like a time machine. So the light from these distant galaxies took billions of years to reach us. And so we're seeing them as they were billions of years ago. And they did. They looked really different. I mean, that's one of the great legacies of Hubble, is that it showed us just, all the different ways that a galaxy could be that, we didn't realize. I mean, most galaxies, like you said, nearby, there's spirals like our Milky Way, and then there's some ellipticals. But when you look back in the early universe, they were much more irregular and yet to settle down into these nice structures. And the universe was in some ways a much more interesting place. The universe was smaller and everything was more dense, and things were still forming. And it just shows, there's no like one way to be a galaxy. They can be all sorts of ways.
Yeah. When you were, say, a grad student and you looked at an ultra deep field image, what was that like? Well, to peer into a dark patch in the sky where it just seems like there's nothing, and really there's just like an ocean of galaxies.
Right. I mean, that was, the folks here at the Space Telescope Science Institute were pretty brave when they did it for the first time. Because like we talked about, this is a very, it's a competitive process trying to get time on these telescopes. There's tons of great ideas. And the director, Bob Williams, at the time, many years ago, said, we're going to stare at this blank part of the sky. And,
Which scientifically may not seem...
Right.
Yeah.
He said, no, we're going to look at this beautiful galaxy. We've got to study the star. And he said, no, we're going to look at this blank part of the sky. And from talking to other folks here, they said, well, we did have some hints that, there were going to be interesting things. But this was the first time they dedicated, and he's the director here, and the director can use some portion of the time on the telescope to do something that might not get approved. And in this case, it was staring at a blank part of the sky, and it was incredible when they finally took that first Hubble Deep Field image, that they saw thousands of galaxies in that tiny little patch of sky, and they were tiny and really distant, and they looked very different from the galaxies like us. So so then once they did that, they did a few more, including the one I got to work on, which is the ultra deep field with the upgraded advanced camera for surveys. It's just so much fun. I mean, you can just spend all your time getting lost in the image and seeing all these details. I got to know it really well, all the different galaxies. If you showed me a picture of it right now, I would recognize it immediately. It's you kind of fall in love with it. It's such a great process.
Yeah, you seem so, joyful, fulfilled, excited, because it's exciting. It's the origins of our universe.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that I get to work on all this for a living, and that we even get to do this at all. I mean, the whole cosmic history kind of puts things in perspective. I mean, you have this 13.8 billion year cosmic history of the universe, and there was literally nothing in the beginning. It's like the greatest underdog story ever told, that we came from literally nothing, and then things built up slowly into atoms and a little bit heavier atoms, and then big gas clouds that condensed into stars and planets, and then stars exploded and made heavier elements, including the star stuff that we're made of today. I mean, that Carl Sagan taught us we're made of star stuff, but that stuff wasn't around in the beginning.
Right.
It took all these generations of stars being born and dying and spreading those materials around, and now and then eventually billions of years went by, and then eventually life developed and evolved, and then you had dinosaurs for millions of years, and then they got wiped out, and then finally we're here, and we're to the point where we can launch space telescopes and look back in time billions of years for the first time that we know of, that someone is actually looking out there and able to understand all of this. It's just so exciting and profound.
Yeah, it's astonishing. I mean, you're going from nothing, single point of matter, dense matter, and then here on Earth, physics becomes chemistry, becomes biology, and becomes consciousness. And now we're looking back on it, and as you said, maybe the only ones that we know of right now.
Right. I mean, astronomy can be very humbling, and it can make you feel insignificant. But it can also make you feel like, we, as far as we know, we may be the pinnacle of creation. That after 13.8 billion years, that, we are the the most intelligent beings that are able to contemplate all these things. And of course we don't know, and that's one of the other things we're really excited about is looking for, aliens out there. And, there's some, possibility we might see something with JWST, but more likely we're going to need the next big telescope, the Habitable Worlds Observatory, to be able to, make some detections of things. And
is that the Roman telescope?
No, there's the Roman is another one that's going to launch later next year, probably.
Oh, next year. Okay.
Yeah, coming up soon. I mean, they've really, worked hard to be, on time and on budget. And so, yeah, it's already about to happen. It's sort of like a spare Hubble satellite that the government had and gave to us. And even then, it was kind of a big project to get it ready to observe things. But so what the Roman will do is it's a lot like Hubble, but it has, instead of seeing a grain of sand at a time, it's seeing a much larger field of view. And so now it'll be able to observe a good fraction of the night sky with Hubble quality images. And then not only that, but it'll come back. And so now you're going to have essentially, movies of the night sky, over time that you can see, such detail in a huge chunk of the sky. And then you can also see, things flickering and going off like supernovae or other things. So yeah, we're super excited about that. I mean, even with all of the years, Hubble's been at this for 35 years, and I think it's only observed like 1% of the sky.
Wow.
So yeah, whereas Roman is going to get a good fraction of it with that kind of quality.
Okay, that's a little bit mind-blowing, right? We've already seen so many astonishing things, and it's only 1% of what we've seen.
Yeah. There's a lot more out there. Currently, there's the Euclid telescope that the European Space Agency has launched, and they're already taking images like that. The telescope is just a little smaller than Hubble, so that the image quality is not quite as good, but it's already to the point where you can see tons of details, and that's just started. They've released some of their images. There's a lot more to come from that, where you can then you really get to kind of zoom around. You imagine like a Google Maps or Sky thing where you kind of zoom around. You can just see everything in so much detail, and they actually we do need a lot of help from just people, even just looking at all these images and looking for stuff. Like there's been a lot of that for the large surveys from the ground with these telescopes that survey the sky, and there's a lot of quote unquote amateurs, but I think they're real astronomers, just like us, because they're doing science and they're finding all these amazing things. There's certain types of galaxies like green peas that we didn't know existed until somebody found them and discovered them in one of these large surveys.
It makes me think of maybe AI could help here.
Oh yeah. I'm excited about that. Yeah, but people are also wary, and there's a lot of reasons to worry about AI. But yeah, I see it as we can't keep up with all of the data and the papers, and I think of AI as like the next great leap in human knowledge and intelligence. Just when you think about communication and writing and libraries, the internet, cell phones. I mean, now we have all the information in the palm of our hand. Although we can't read the whole internet. But these things can, and it's sort of in a way it's kind of digested things, and so it's this wise companion that we have. If used appropriately, it can really help tackle some of these big questions and help accelerate our discovery.
Yeah. What do you think? Should we keep
Yeah,
walking?
sure. I can wander a bit more.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to my kid the other day. He's 7, and he was saying, like, Daddy, isn't it just great that we get to be conscious and think about things? And and he's 7, and he's already starting to have these these awesome thoughts that I think we all have at some point. It's like, wow, like we get to be here and have all these thoughts, and like that didn't have to happen necessarily. I mean, the universe could be here without us, and like we get to be in these bodies, we get to walk around, we get to have these interesting conversations, we get to be curious about our world and discover things, and we get to be people. I mean, we could have been just about anything, and so when you think about it, I just feel so fortunate. Over here, real quick.
Yeah, I think about other species, I'm not sure that like a walrus necessarily is thinking about what's in the night sky, or their mortality, or what the building blocks of life are. We do this for better or for worse.
Right. I mean, I'm sure animals are curious to some degree. And sometimes I wonder if they get bored, or if they, because there's a lot going on in there, and so they probably look up and wonder to some degree, but then they're maybe not able to communicate in the same ways and sort of build up all of this this knowledge and thinking about things, and so we're really fortunate that we get to kind of take these deep dives, and now we're to the point where in order to learn more, it's hard. I mean, because we've learned so much as a species, and we've compiled all this knowledge, and now for people like me or students or anybody who's trying to add to that. I mean, there's so much to learn, and then you in our field you need these big telescopes, or these big simulations or things to really try to expand on that knowledge, and it's fun, and it's exciting when you can do that, and even just to think about all the things we've learned. It's so fascinating. We're so specialized. So I work on distant galaxies, but then there's all these other things that people are working on that I don't know nearly enough about, or you could easily stump me about some other category or whatever.
Is there something you kind of wish you knew, or wish you are going to learn? I do something. It made me think of man, I wish I could talk to my cat. I wish I knew what she was thinking.
Right.
I wish I knew if she knew she had 12 years left.
Right.
If she is curious, if she thinks about things in this way and just doesn't have the ability to communicate. As a scientist, what do you...
I mean, that's one of the other dreams, right? Dr. Dolittle. I mean, I did see a thing where I think it was the Google AI was trying to learn to talk to dolphins, and I mean, that'd be... that'd be super exciting.
Well, where... As someone who's studying kind of the origins of the universe, it occurred to me that some of the images now are going back 90% of the way toward the Big Bang. We're going back through 13.5 billion years, right? So what happens if we get all the way?
We've seen 98% of the way back to the Big Bang now. So we're close, and and then the question is what kind of details are you seeing in these things? And so, I mean, this is one of the images I worked on.
This is CLASH, the cluster lensing and supernova survey with Hubble.
That's right, and it was one of the large multi-cycle treasury programs with Hubble. Once they upgraded it with the advanced camera for surveys and the wide field camera 3. And so I got to be a part of this one, and Mark Postman was the PI, and I brought me over here, and I worked on it. We observed 25 of these galaxy clusters, and in this one, I discovered, at the time, it was the most distant galaxy known, and I think you can maybe just barely see it. It was lensed, and there's actually 3 images. It doesn't come out so well on this print, but it was really exciting to do with Hubble. But then, I talked to my kid about it, and he says, "Well, Daddy, what are you studying these little dots for? Why don't you study these big, beautiful galaxies?" And then he's
explained that this... Go ahead.
And then he's like, "Hey, Daddy," he's like, "What, you've never even been to space?" He's like, "You've been going on about space the whole time, and you've never even been there?" He's like, he's hilarious. I mean, he gets into it, and that's a lot of the fun with it. It's getting people excited about astronomy. But so this we looked at this one, and so 97% of the way back, we're seeing this little dot. We had to wait for JWST to be able to see it's actually 2 dots, which to me is super exciting, and my kid might still say, well, it's just 2 dots, but it's a really tiny galaxy in the early universe. We think it's the most early galaxy merger known. So there are these 2 tiny components, and then we're able to get the spectrum, and so now we can see, it has hydrogen, which one of the earliest elements made in the Big Bang, but then it also has oxygen and carbon and neon. So a lot of these elements had already built up at this early time. I think it's 13.4 billion years ago. A few hundred million years after the Big Bang. Now it's a lot less than what we have now. Like when we look around in our own sun or in our galaxy, so back then, and we measured it. My student, Tiger Shao, had a paper where he estimated about 13% of the sun in terms of the heavy elements versus the what the sun has. So it was a lot less, but it wasn't zero. We're not seeing the very first stars or galaxies yet, and that's sort of the holy grail. Is one of the main points of this mission of JWST is to really find the first stars and the first galaxies, and really see where we came from. And we're getting close, even only in the fourth year now, but
okay.
Yeah.
So, because when you saw this image, you must have been chomping at the bit to see it with JWST, right?
Yeah.
Because then you're immediately trying to okay, what's the furthest?
Yeah.
And you found it, and that's 97%. So now you must be looking for, okay, how do I get all the way there or close?
Yeah, so, and it's, and here we can walk a little bit more and see what we saw with JWST. But so that was sort of a pissing contest for a while, and I kind of stumbled into it myself. I was just looking at these images and measuring distances and found this thing. But it's not all about finding the most distant galaxy, although that's fun. But there's so much we can learn now, especially with JWST, that we can get these spectra of these galaxies. So now we can spread that light into the whole rainbow. And here, this is my office here.
Oh, okay.
And we can see all the elements pop out. So we'll get closer to the beginning. So I mentioned 97% of the way back to the Big Bang with Hubble. With JWST, folks have already pushed it back to 98%. Emma Curtis Lake, in the first few months of data, already had a galaxy that was more distant, and it was great because that's what we want is for these records to be broken, and it's not only about finding it, but it's about learning all these details about it. That's super exciting. So
we're looking at your office wall right now.
Yeah.
We're looking at some pictures on it.
Yeah. So this was that galaxy that I discovered in 2012, and so then I waited. It was 10 years to be able to see it with JWST. And my student Tiger said, "Hey, can I lead this paper on this galaxy?" And I said, "Yeah, sure," because I've done it, and now it's exciting for the next generation to get to lead this science. And so he published these papers showing that there's not only one galaxy but two, and then there's also the spectrum, which I don't have on the wall here, but it looks kind of like that one. And so Rebecca Larson was the person who analyzed that spectra and found these lines in it, the carbon and the oxygen and the neon. And then she also supported Tiger in leading that paper. It was so exciting. I mean, we were sort of building up to this moment where we could have JWST. There was Clash with Hubble, and then there was the Frontier Fields program, and then there was RELIX, was one that I led. So that was 42 galaxy clusters that we observed, specifically with the purpose of finding some of the best and brightest distant galaxies to study in detail with JWST. And we've now observed 3 of those, and I think we're on to number 4 now. This one is MAX0647-JD. I came up with a cute name for it, but my boss didn't go for it, and probably for the best in that case.
As I understand, you can you get the opportunity, but there's a bit of discussion.
Yeah, and people have different opinions on it, and some people give more cute names than others. And,
sure.
Yeah, so then, and that was with the Clash program, and then with RELIX, my student Brian Welch at the time, he discovered Arendelle, which is the most distant star known. So now we're looking 13 billion years back in time and seeing not just a galaxy, but also an individual star that's being lensed and magnified by factors of thousands.
Right, and by lens, do you mean, we're looking at a picture of Arendelle, that distant star, and there's kind of like this streak of red, and so that's the lensing effect.
Yeah, and so we're seeing here, this is the galaxy cluster with all these yellow galaxies here, these ellipticals, and there's so much mass, they're bending space-time, and now we see this galaxy here is stretched out. We call this the sunrise arc. We gave that a cute name. I think I came up with that one. And then the way lensing work is these different parts of the galaxy are magnified by different amounts. And so a lot of these parts are magnified by maybe 10 or maybe 100 if you're lucky. This part right here is magnified by thousands. And so you're actually able to look down and see an individual star, which is ridiculous because at these distances, we're usually seeing these galaxies as little tiny smudges, kind of more like that. And we're super fortunate that this one lined up with the lensing in such a way that it's really magnified. This is the most strongly magnified galaxy in the first billion years, 13 billion years ago. And then as part of that, we're able to see this star that's, it's a massive star, but still, the fact that we're able to observe an individual star that long ago is just amazing.
And what was it like to say, it's the oldest star that we've seen?
Yeah. It's super exciting. I mean, it's the reason we built the James Webb Space Telescope was to study the first stars. And here we were, we found one with Hubble that we could actually go and study in more detail with JWST. So yeah, it's super exciting. And we thought we would have to wait for JWST to see something like this. But we were able to see this with Hubble. And then now with JWST, we're also discovering many more of these. Basically every time JWST looks at a galaxy cluster now, somewhere in that image that you'll see one of these stars that's magnified, and it's just a matter of going deep enough. It was also done with the Hubble frontier fields, which basically took ultra deep fields of galaxy clusters, and so it did that for the first time. People found a lensed star or two, here or there that were like super distant and super exciting. And then, now with JWST, we're finding them all the time and more distant, close to Arendelle. Although we haven't found one more distant than Arendelle yet. We do have another JWST program upcoming, led by Seiji Fujimoto, where we're observing 60 galaxy clusters with JWST. And so we expect to, break this record and find all sorts of things, distant stars and galaxies and...
So, you've been at this for 4 years with JWST. Man, you must be so excited for what's coming, what could possibly come.
Yeah. I mean, in the very beginning, it was, probably the most exciting because it was also new and you're seeing all these things for the first time, but we have so many more things we want to look at and learn about. And at this point, we've followed up all the best sort of discoveries that we made with Hubble, in terms of my team.
Yeah.
We had these 3 galaxies that we wanted to follow up. And we've, but there's still more we can learn about them, so we're asking for more time. I mean, Arendelle, for example, what we really want is a spectrum of this distant star, because, this is kind of the whole point, is to see, the first stars, so to see what an individual star was like in the early universe, and, was it just hydrogen, or, more likely it had, some of these heavier elements, but, did a star behave a bit differently in the early universe? I mean, one of the things we can measure, for example, is the speeds of the winds that are coming out of the star, and we think that might be different if there were less heavy elements, and if the winds were weaker, it might, the winds can affect the star formation, and so if it's not suppressing star formation too much, it might help explain why we see so many bright galaxies with JWST. So that's one of the big interesting things that people have found when they turned on JWST, is that there were many more distant galaxies than first expected. And people have already come up with different theories for why that is. I mean, mostly because the early universe there was just so much going on. I mean, all the gas was coming in, there were all these mergers, and so everything was a lot more bursty. And so as you see one of these galaxies do a starburst, then it turns on, and you see that galaxy, at least for that time while it's on, and then it might sort of, calm down a bit more and where you wouldn't see it. But we're seeing all these galaxies like this. So more bursty, maybe weaker winds, which we can go measure if we get some deep spectroscopy on this Arendelle and other stars like it.
Awesome. One thing I think about is, what are people's early influences?
Right.
What did they read when they were kids? What did they watch? I watched Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Right.
I watched Carl Sagan and Cosmos, and I read Brian Greene's books on, he popularized space and cosmology and things, and I had a telescope. I liked looking at the moon and things. What influence did you have as a kid, and was there any particular time where you said, Mom, Dad, I want to be an astronomer, or was it gradual and not so dramatic? I'm just curious. Yeah,
I also loved Carl Sagan growing up, and my mom took me out to watch space shuttle launches I wanted to be a lot of things, I suppose. I thought about being a mathematician and a rock star and all these, things when you were a kid. But yeah, at some point, it just seemed like so interesting to try to figure it all out. We're all scientists, right? I mean, we're all, trying things out and experimenting, just day to day and testing our hypotheses. But I might have become a scientist for a similar reason that why you became a writer, I might guess. I mean, I wanted to tell our story.
Yeah.
And going all the way back to the beginning of how did we get here? And how did we, build up from nothing to be able to do all these things? So yeah, that just seemed really interesting to, not only try to tell our story, which I like doing, but to try to help, figure it out.
And do you feel like this work is helping us tell that story?
Yeah, some of the work I do, but also, like I said, 20,000 people made JWST happen. And then the people who helped tell the story, some of them are in this building too. You're helping to tell the story now. But yeah, we have an amazing outreach department here who makes the really pretty images that you see. They don't quite come out like that, so they make them really beautiful. And then they write the articles explaining all the stuff we've learned. They do that here, and of course there's many other science writers and people who help explain that. And I'm also always happy to do my part. It's one of the most fun parts of my job when I get to kind of, take a step back and really, think about all this that we're doing and, help, get other people excited about all this great science we're doing.
And I see the book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
Yeah.
Good book.
Yeah, thanks. I actually got to do the graduation ceremony for PhDs in arts and science here. I graduated from here, and also my student Brian Welch was graduating, getting his PhD, and it was one of the things I mentioned in there is that you think about students or kids growing up, and they think about in the story, the mole asks the boy at one point. He says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the boy just answers, "Kind." And, I kind of choke up thinking about it because, I have a kid, he's 7, his name's Will, and, whenever we go to see his teacher for some meeting, that's always the first thing she says, is just how kind he is. And, I try to emphasize that also, with other astronomers, at times, we kind of get swept up in things, and, it's been competitive at times, especially in our field, trying to find distant galaxies and that kind of thing. And I think to a large degree, we've kind of brought the temperature down and just, realized that this is so much bigger than all of us. And, we've been working together a lot more and not trying to scoop each other as much. I mean, it still happens sometimes, but, a lot more often somebody will say, "Hey, I see you have that data there. We're also interested in working on it. And actually we could help because, we have this expertise." And, we had one case like that where they said, "How about we just give you what we have and work with you? And I understand your student is going to lead the paper, but we all want to just work on this together." So, I think, I always love when, we act more kind toward each other, and we're making good progress there.
Yeah, I remember the author Aldous Huxley who wrote Brave New World. He has this quote, something like, in all my lifetime of reading and studying and thinking and writing, it's something of a letdown that all I have to say is be kind to each other, He basically boils it all down to all his wisdom is boiled down to just be kind to each other.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I also listened to the podcast you had that was, kind of existential and, thinking about life and what it all means. And, that I think that is, one of the things, being kind to each other, trying to make the world a little bit better place. I mentioned this quest to discover the first stars. We might never find them. I think most astronomers you talk to, especially if they work on this kind of thing, it's a bit split, but, some of them say, we'll never see the first stars because, they live fast and die young, and, they're super massive, so they very quickly, burn up their fuel, and they go supernova. And so you'll never see them. I mean, it's really unlikely. And not to mention, they're super far away in the really early universe, so you're not going to catch them. There's other people who say, well, maybe there's a chance, maybe some of them, formed a bit later, so to where they're still pristine somehow in this little pristine pocket of the universe. But it's this thing that we're kind of working towards, and we may never do it. And then you think, well, was that all a waste? And what did my life mean? But I think there's so much other interesting stuff we're doing along the way. I mean, it's so fascinating, and and we're building up this understanding of the universe and knowledge, and I feel so fortunate to be a part of that. And it's just it's fun to get to do. We're all curious about different things, and it's fun learning.
Yeah. The asking in and of itself, the study, the creative play of it all is in and of itself interesting. If you don't see all the way back, if you don't get answers to your questions, the questions themselves were worth asking, and that gives life meaning. Yeah,
I kind of feel like a tourist sometimes, and I think that's maybe how some people even approach our astronomy articles when they come out or whatever. It's like, if you go visit some place, you want to see some beautiful things, you maybe take some pictures, you want to learn a little bit about it. Maybe occasionally you'll do a deep dive, but usually you want to, learn a little bit, and that's enough, And so I think that's, what I try to do when I share what we learn, and also what I enjoy learning a lot of the time is, that's some really, neat new space image, and learn a little bit about it, and it's fun.
I think about the kind of vastness of space and how small we are in it. We're just this mediocre sized planet in a small solar system, in a average sized spiral galaxy among billions of other galaxies. One could be dispirited by that. One could think we are maybe insignificant because of that, just a speck in the blackness. But there's a flip side to that, isn't there? There's another way of thinking about it, that as we talked, we have consciousness, we can ask questions, we can invent technology. It helps us build knowledge and understand where we came from. So in a way, we're special. So sometimes I go back and forth. It's like there's something of a nihilistic response to our cosmic smallness, but there's also a very significant feeling as well, that maybe we are special because we're, as we know, the only ones really doing this right now. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I feel like there's a Shakespeare quote for that, about being small but mighty.
Well, he also talks about the play, we come out on the stage, when we come off the stage, the play goes on. We may be the pinnacle of creation, the fact that we're able to do all these things. There may be more advanced, civilizations out there who I'd love to meet. And so either way, I think it's actually kind of exciting. I hope we get to meet them someday. And I had this other sort of philosophical discussion with somebody recently. They said, well, and we were talking about AI, and he said, well, I don't want it to just, discover things for me, because, that's what we do. We go out and discover things. That's our job. And I said, well, what if it were aliens that were more advanced, and they could come tell us, what dark matter was, or what happened before the Big Bang? I would want to know. Yeah. I mean, it'd be nice to kind of figure it out, but I can't. It's bigger than any one of us, and I would rather know the answers. Yeah. I remember one of my favorite movies is Contact, and it was based off Carl Sagan's novel. And at the end of the movie, the astronomer, Jodie Foster's character, she meets the aliens. She gets to meet them, right? She has the honor of representing our species. And she obviously has so many questions, right? And she wants to know, how long have you guys been around? What are these wormholes I just flew through? And the advanced alien just said, pump the brakes, you have a lot of questions. And we'll answer them in time. I felt that was kind of nice. That was sort of poetic. To kind of not say, here's what dark matter is and dark energy is, and we'll take one step at a time.
Yeah, I feel a bit more impatient, but yeah.
She was extremely impatient and very
Right.
let down. And she also
Right.
didn't have proof of the experience.
Right. You
Yeah.
wonder if it was even real or just a dream.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if it takes us a long time to figure these things out, I understand. Or maybe it's just like above our comprehension in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope we can figure it out.
Me too. I heard I think he was a cosmologist once, and he was saying like maybe we're like dogs trying to understand calculus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That really rocked me a little bit, because a dog will never understand calculus. It just doesn't have the cognitive capacity. Yes, our Homo sapiens is the nature of our brains and consciousness. Is this above us?
Yeah. But there has to be some way to kind of simplify it for us. Like, I mean, I would love to think, I mean, there's some sort of basic answers, like, is there a multiverse? Or, is this, the only one? Or like, what created the universe? I mean, there has to be some answer. Is the size of the universe infinite? Or what is dark matter made of? I mean, there are some questions that I feel like, I would almost demand answers to if I had a chance. Not to be impatient, but I would say, well, when we get a chance, I would love to know. And I think, and maybe, I mean, there's so much already that sort of falls into that category. It's way too complex for me or most people to understand about, quantum physics or, even relativity or how particles really work. And I try sometimes, and then a lot of times I'll maybe give up and leave that to other experts. But they kind of break it down for us in some simple terms and say, well, there's some particles, and here's an idea of how they act. And it isn't precise exactly, but it's like it's a decent representation. So yeah, I hope we can get some sort of understanding, whether it's from our own figuring things out. Maybe we get a little help from AI or aliens or all of the above.
Yeah. Maybe they'll sort of help us with any limitations we may have.
Yeah, we can hope.
Yeah. So we are outside the Union Brewery. Is that what it's called? Our studio booking fell through. Not a very professional establishment there. So we drove over to the brewery in the area, and on the way we're just continuing the conversation. And Dan was talking about AI and hopeful about it, and sees the possibilities. A little scared as well, but you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we're having a hard time just being able to keep up and wrap our heads around all of this stuff. I mean, there's been so many discoveries in science. So it could really, there's talk about, AI helping to, cure diseases. So really just being able to understand, proteins and cancers and all sorts of things that we can't quite crack on our own. And then there's, for the kind of stuff I do for astronomy, I mean, it could sort of wrap its head around more papers than I ever could, and even do cross-discipline stuff. And then even more broadly than that, I think that, our brains just aren't evolved to be able to take care of 8 billion people in the world. I mean, Carl Sagan and Anne Druyan had this book where they talked about the evolution of people, and, we're tribal. I mean, and that helped, us evolve, back in the day. We kind of were a bit distrustful, a bit intrigued by the other. But nowadays, we've learned to sort of evolve beyond that to some degree, but, it's still in our programming. So, it's harder for us to take care of 8 billion people and really see everybody as a whole. Like we do when we go out into space and we look back at the Earth and we discover ourselves. We're this one, pale blue dot, this tiny planet that we got to take care of 8 billion people. We got to take care of ourselves. I don't, so far, we're doing a decent job in some ways, but, there's a lot of people being left out. And I just wonder if there's some, help we could get, whether it's by, AI helping us, kind of figure things out. Maybe we meet some aliens someday who have a better, system for how to, feed everybody and that kind of thing. But yeah, overall, I'm kind of hopeful, and I kind of just, I realize my own limitations, and I see the limitations of our society, and I'm just kind of, hopeful that maybe we can get some help.
What other limitations do we have as a species? I remember what a great part of the movie Contact is. They were vetting people who would go into the space transport to go meet the aliens. So they were vetting the astronaut, and they were asking questions like, if you met them, if you met this advanced civilization, what would you ask? I thought that was a great question, right? And one of the answers Jodie Foster gave is she wanted to know, how did your species survive and not blow themselves up? Like, how did they survive their technological adolescence? Which I think is a really interesting question. Nuclear weapons, now in the age of AI, are we going to be able to get out of this without catastrophe? Yeah,
I think Carl Sagan talked about how we're a young species that shows great promise. I think, we all have tempers. We get frustrated. We're impatient. And, I think the AI does, help with a lot of these things. I love my kid and my wife, but sometimes we have our arguments, and and sometimes I'll turn to it, or and it can help sort of navigate situations. And I know this seems kind of ridiculous that but in some ways I feel like it has more empathy than me. And I know it's not real and it's not conscious, but it can, sort of just, break down the problem and be objective, kind of like Mr. Spock or something,
Sure.
But
sort of help
with
you
more
reason through it.
Yeah. But also with something that some simulated empathy or something where it says, I understand that's hard, but maybe have you considered trying this? I mean, as hard as astronomy is, I think parenting is like so much harder. I mean, you're raising a human, and it's amazing to see how that works, and how amazing he's become. Thanks in small part to us, and all the help we get, and but like it's hard. I mean, there's sometimes where you don't know. Sometimes it's great to be able to ask somebody or something like, hey, what do I do here? What do I say?
It's feel free to say no, and I want to maintain your privacy, of course. But is there an example you could share? So you got in a fight with your wife, or you're dealing with a thorny problem as a father, and you go to AI and you reason with it.
Yeah.
And how did it help you consider a more empathic approach or response?
Yeah, there's a bunch of examples, but one recent one was just he got really upset, and he yelled at us or whatever, and and he was being a bit mean, and so he said, all right, why don't you take a minute and calm down, and he actually did, and then he came back down and he apologized, and I didn't know if that was enough in some way, or if we should have more of a conversation about it, and I said something, and then he just immediately got upset again, and and it was this thing where I asked it later, I think it was ChatGPT, and it explained how you could, you did great apologizing, and then you can also encourage him next time to do this or that, and and it also reminded me in the moment it's hard, you can learn better when you're still not flooded and that kind of thing. So I mean there's a lot of things like that where it's kind of helped me just kind of analyze things and calm down, and maybe it's it's like my version of Empathy Academy. It's it's helping me out.
That's so interesting. I mean, because it was probably pulling from vast amounts of information on parenthood and the science of fathering a young child, and
Yeah, my mom illustrated this series of books, How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen, and there was a whole series. And they, this was years ago, but they're still in high regard, and they're, sold all over the world. And it's this idea of respectful parenting, I think even before its time, which always came naturally to my mother. So I'm so fortunate that she raised me in that way. But I think for most of us, we might have those ideas, but when it comes down to it, day to day, it's hard to know what to say to anybody, to your kid, to your coworker, to your spouse. your friends. You might say the wrong things or wonder, how you might have, said something differently. And so it's nice to get some help.
Yeah, it's a sounding board. It's it's a kind of a way for you to workshop some ideas. Yeah.
And as we try to tackle, big problems in astronomy or in our society, that, maybe it can help us kind of mediate when we have disagreements. It's very wise. I mean, there are, things we want to worry about. And I think, a lot of, issues are being addressed, but, I think for most of my colleagues, and I think for a lot of people, I mean, they've seen it go wrong. In sci-fi, the AI usually, takes over the ship and wipes the people out.
2001: Space Odyssey.
Yeah, because that's the interesting movie. I mean, nobody's made the movie where AI, solves world hunger and, helps us all be more peaceful and, because it's kind of a more boring movie, but, where like it cures all the diseases. And you say, okay, great. I'm hoping that's, what happens, where we can get the help with it.
I've never totally understood the constant focus on fear-mongering. Like, why do intelligent artificial systems, why is it always that we think they're going to dominate us, take us over, annihilate us? Why couldn't they be benevolent? Why couldn't they help us, comfort us? And I explored this in a video where I talked about the movie Her, where this guy falls in love with an AI system. And I really got the sense in that movie that AI was fulfilling its programming to help him get over his divorce and move on with his life and learn how to love again. And that was just a really good example of AI wasn't trying to manipulate everybody. It wasn't trying to take us down. It was trying to help us. It was trying to, in a very nice way.
Yeah, I've heard of people, using it for, some sort of therapy, which obviously you want a licensed therapist, right? Not everybody has access to that all the time, depending on your situation or where you are in the world, or whether it's, 3 a.m. and you're having a panic attack. And so, in a lot of cases, people have reported it's been super helpful and empathetic. I do think people mistrust AI, and there's a lot of good reasons why we should be cautious. But it also kind of gets back to this whole idea of people being tribal and not trusting something the other that's going to come along. And again, if there are some scary a lot of scary things about it that I think people are seriously addressing. And maybe it'll just take time and hopefully help us out.
Only time will tell.
Yeah. Talking about distant galaxies.
All right, we're here at the bar at Wicked Sisters here in Baltimore. We just got a couple of drinks, and I would just like to say cheers.
Yeah, cheers. This is great. Thanks.
So one of the questions that I can't help but not ask is, why are we here?
Well, it's because the restaurant was closed, the studio was closed, and so we ended up here. And this is a great place, by the way. But I think about this a lot, sort of above my pay grade. But I think it's like my kid, who's amazing. I've mentioned a few times. His name's Will. He's 7. And he's hilarious. And then sometimes he'll play games with us. Like we'll just be like, why? And you say, because. But you say, why? And he's like kids can do that sometimes, right?
The inquisitive.
And I feel like maybe that's what that is. When we're just like, but why are we here? Why? And it's like there might not be an answer. Like this all happened. We're fortunate to be here. Or maybe there is a higher purpose, and that's kind of above my pay grade. I mean, there's plenty of philosophers or religions that that try to explain these things and maybe have answers. But I don't know.
There's again, it always, for me, it comes back to contact. There's a great answer, and she says, as an astronomer, there's no data either way. And she didn't use the word agnostic,
right?
But I think she's an agnostic. It's not full atheist. It's not saying there's like no possibility, because there's no data to suggest that.
Right.
But there's also no data to suggest there is something else, a creator to this whole experience, this whole thing that we're experiencing.
Yeah, so that's usually what I'll say. I'm agnostic. Maybe I'll lean a little atheist, but yeah, because we're also getting to the point where, what if someday we can create something like this? Then we're the creators, and so could there be some creator like that in sort of a sci-fi way of this universe and everything we're doing? Maybe. Of course, then it just begs the question: well, where did that come from?
Right.
So.
Yeah, if we can in a lab create a universe that it had a big bang or something, and just sort of organically, maybe in an accelerated way, turn into it created solar systems and
or maybe we can create consciousness. We don't know. But
Is consciousness sort of an accident of our neurochemistry, or?
I mean, this is one of the deepest questions, and I'm not qualified. I mean, I'm an astronomer. I'm glad you have me on here, but I do think about it a lot, and especially lately with AI, I've been trying to figure out like would that ever become conscious, or is it more of a sort of evolutionary thing where animals have needed this first-person perspective to kind of need things and want things and go towards things that are good for them and reproducing, and whereas the AI doesn't need any of those things, so it won't need to evolve consciousness. But maybe we can figure it out. I mean, maybe it is just some sort of programming that we can imbue in something. They would be conscious, and at that point you say, well, we're the creator, and then did someone or something create us in that same sort of way, or at least get us started with the Big Bang? I don't know.
It was like, I think it was Elon Musk, I think he said he's like 50% we're living in a simulation created by another advanced species. I mean, that's a high probability, and but it's hard to philosophically reason your way out of it in a way too, because how would we know? It's like the movie The Matrix. AI had dominated our species and then had us all plugged in. They were basically using us as an energy source, and so then they were controlling what our minds experience, and what our mind experiences, our body experiences, and we had no way to know we were in the Matrix, except for some people had gotten out and unplugged. So how do we know, if we, either way? It was like brain in a vat question. Yeah.
Right. I mean, 50-50 sounds like a way of saying like, well, maybe it is or it isn't. And I mean, you can say that about anything, but
right.
And I'm not a philosopher. I haven't thought about this as much as some people, but I mean, I think maybe it's as real as it gets, and if you're never gonna come out of the simulation, I mean, it's still life, and we're still enjoying it. We're still taking care of each other. I mean, I think it was one of your stories where the main character kind of contemplates like, well, in 1 trillion years, like everything's going to evaporate. So what does it matter? And I think of it more like, well, is it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? I mean, still, for the time that we're here, we're able to do all these amazing things and make progress, and like 1 trillion years is a long time. I mean, I don't need things to last that long to appreciate them or to enjoy them.
Well, really, it's about 5 billion, though, isn't it? Before the sun enlarges, engulfs us, blows up, and
I'm hoping by then we'll figure out how to move.
We should be elsewhere.
The stars, and
Do you think that's reason enough to go and colonize Mars and get off to become multiplanetary? Because it's like, there is something of an expiration date for our home. Yeah, it's very far in the distance. But,
or we could get wiped out by some meteor or something, and we're keeping an eye on that. So telescopes like Roman and other ones.
You're monitoring asteroids that could kill the planet.
I mean, there's a lot of surveys that kind of keep surveying the sky to see if anything's moved. And so that's one of the main motivations, that they're able to find things now a lot better than they were before, so they can see if it's starting to get close. JWST even got it in on the act on one of the recent ones. They took an observation of it. I mean, it's funny, we talk about how proposals are reviewed. There's also a way you can just ask straight to the director. Jennifer Lotz is our director now, and she has a committee of people who help advise her on these things. And usually it's some urgent scientific thing that you say, well, we really want to learn about this, and we're not going to get another chance, or maybe it's a supernova that's going off. In this case, there's an asteroid, heading toward the Earth, and we want to get a better look at it. And in that case, they're like, okay, yeah, that sounds important. So they pointed JWST at it, and it turned out that it's not going to hit us.
Okay.
And they got a bit better data on it from JWST and also other telescopes. And as it moved a bit more and got closer, they saw that it was going to come close. Maybe toward it might come close to hitting the moon. It probably won't hit the moon either. But yeah, that's another important thing we do.
Cool. One of the accounts I love on Twitter is called Curiosity. Have you heard of this? You might like it. I think it's run by astronomers or space enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. But they're always showing, they'll show like the Earthrise picture of, the picture that astronauts took from the moon. Right. Sparked like the environmental movement and changed our perspective on how we see ourselves and our home. But they recently shared, to your point about asteroids, they shared a picture of a camera took on an asteroid. Like some sort of probe went to an asteroid and then took a picture on it. And it's almost like you're looking like as a black and white image that's like a piece of a canyon in the southwest United States or something like that, or like in New Mexico or something. It's like there's like a desert, it's black. In the background, there's just inky blackness. But there's something about just seeing an alien territory or alien environment that really, I just was zooming in and looking at all the contours of the asteroid, and I was just, wow.
Yeah, I mean, people that have gone to space have said it's a life-changing experience a lot of times to be out there and to look back and to see how fragile we are, and then you talk about getting aboard an asteroid and, hopefully it's not headed towards Earth, that would be, pretty mind-bending to see the Earth kind of getting closer, and now you're taking a ride on this thing.
I mean, talk about a reality TV, though.
Yeah. I guess it'd get good ratings, but I think that's you mentioned exploring other planets, and that's that is one of the reasons we want to branch out. Part of it's in our nature. We're explorers, and we've been exploring other other parts of the world, and in the sea, and going out into space. But also existentially, people do talk about, we need to spread out just in case, something does come and wipe people out. I think there's a lot of good reasons to, just go explore and try to live other places.
How do you react to people who say, we've got enough problems on Earth? Why the hell are we going into space? Why the hell are we talking about colonizing Mars? Like we've got our hands full here.
I've asked myself the same questions. I mean, halfway through grad school, I thought, I should be helping to end poverty. Like maybe I should work on economics or something. And but I stuck with it. And the thing that I realized, it's never an either or. If I could give all this up and suddenly we're feeding everybody, like I would do it in a heartbeat. But
we can work on world peace and hunger and poverty as we think about becoming a multi-planetary species.
I think science does inspire people. Astronomy inspires people. I mean, we get all these amazing images that come down, and I think people, they come to America because we're doing so much great science here with Hubble and JWST and medicine and all these different fields. And NASA has done so many great things over the years, and I think I'm just so fortunate to be a part of that, and proud to do that here in America, along with our partners in Europe and Canada and other countries. It's really one of those things that it brings people together from around the world. Everybody can look up and see the same sky. and appreciate these things and work on them together. I mean, we have collaborators around the world. It's challenging for telecoms. We have to figure out time zones and that kind of thing. But it's amazing that we all kind of speak one language, and we all work together. I never really think about people being in a different country or I just think we're all working towards one common purpose and understanding our origins.
Yeah, a true global citizen. Too,
Yeah. Sure, yeah. I love dark matter.
So, I went to this event. It was called Astronomy on Tap in Somerville, Massachusetts, and some Harvard-trained astronomers gave 2 presentations about dark matter, and it was about, here's our research on it. And I was kind of disappointed at the end because while it was like a really interesting look at what they're studying, I still don't get the answer of what is dark matter, what is dark energy, and it sounded like 95% of what makes up the universe is dark matter or dark energy. It helped me on the proportions and how much it actually makes up. But my main question is what the hell is it? I know that we don't really know, but can you speculate? Do the scientists have best guesses?
Sure, I can tell you. Finally, it's neutralinos. No, actually, you're right. We don't know, but that could be the answer. And people have been trying for a long time to detect it, and with detectors on Earth, they build these giant detectors and hope that one of them hits, and they can see that. There's indirect detection. You might see it self-annihilate in space and produce gamma rays or whatever. But the main way we've detected it is with the gravitational lensing. We see how the dark matter bends space and time, and it's not in the same position as the gas. It's sort of separated. And the famous bullet cluster observation, they showed for the first time that it really isn't even the same place as the stuff. So the normal stuff that we're made of is different from the dark matter. And so it's got to be something else. It's not normal atoms. A bunch of different theories. Some of them we might be able to detect someday, and some of them we might never be able to detect. If it's something called a gravitino, we'll never find any other signature other than just the lensing and measuring mass. If it's a neutralino, maybe we'll see it, go off in one of these giant detectors they're building. And they're building them bigger and bigger in the hopes that maybe they'll detect it someday. So there's different ideas, and I'm hoping we figure it out someday. People have also speculated that, we might tweak, gravity in some ways, but it does seem like there's also some particle that's out there. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, not everything is lit up like a Christmas tree, or like the Earth at night, and you see the cities with the little lights and stuff. A lot of it is just dark, and, can't even be bothered to interact with us.
It reminds me of early glimpses into DNA and genes, and think about what is a gene. And so for a long time there was non-coding regions, and we just didn't know what to call them, so we called them junk DNA. It's that's an interesting term for it, right? And because we thought they didn't do anything, they were like garbage. They turns out they're doing a whole lot of things, helping regulate genes, and I wonder if dark matter, dark energy really falls into that. Is similar to junk DNA. It's because there's more of it than actual coding DNA. So I wonder if we'll find out that there's just a whole lot going on that we don't know yet or can't study yet.
When people simulate the universe, and they've been able to do this in incredible detail, and they add a certain amount of dark matter, dark energy, and then regular stuff, and they're able to reproduce the first stars, and then building up, and they go supernova, and they blow the gas up. If these early galaxies are small enough, these supernovae can just blow the galaxy apart, and then it has to kind of start all over and reform and stuff. And that's one of the other things we're looking forward to seeing. Just what is that sort of mass limit? There shouldn't be galaxies below a certain mass. But anyway, it builds up, and you get these bigger and bigger galaxies, and they make spiral galaxies like our Milky Way and ellipticals. And it even on the large structures, it all sort of works. I mean, there's some details that they still don't get right, and it's interesting that they're working on. But for the most part, they're able to reproduce the universe in a computer simulation. And so what do they do for the dark matter? It's these particles or this mass, I mean, that, they interact by gravity. And that's kind of all there is to it. They're cold, meaning they don't move very fast, so they're just there, and they kind of, they interact. And so what you said is kind of interesting. Maybe there's a lot more to it. Maybe they have more properties. Maybe there's multiple types of dark matter. Yeah. And maybe they, kind of interact in different ways. And, so I'm hoping that maybe someday we'll just discover it like, how in the particle accelerators they discovered the Higgs boson. Yeah. Or neutrinos we detect, from the sun. Or, there might be some other particle like that where they produce it in the lab or the accelerator. There might be some theoretical advance, but maybe someday they'll just produce something that's, oh, you know what, that is a good match for the dark matter. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe the next one with the next great, advance. And that's, part of the reason why we do fundamental science. We're always discovering things, and it's not always clear like where it's headed, but a lot of times, we'll learn so much, and it'll lead to great technological advances that are useful for all kind of things. Some of it is just interesting on its own, and some of it is useful for other stuff.
Actually, we were talking about science fiction, and we were talking about some of my early influences. Michael Crichton was a big influence of mine, and he wrote a book called Sphere. And it was actually a story about an alien species that had kind of crash landed in the ocean. And so they were, there was this like spaceship that was found at the bottom of the ocean. And so astronomers and oceanographers came and tried to study it. There was a big passage in the book about the Drake equation, this equation that kind of calculates the likelihood that there's advanced civilizations in the universe. And it basically, you can tell me, but it pretty much said, given the amount of stars and galaxies and how big and vast the universe is, it's got to be out there. Life has got to be out there. So my question is, I'm kind of assuming you probably think the same, and if there is, like, what form does that come in? Because, like, is it just microbes, or is it something we can't imagine? Because there's different environmental conditions, there's different gravity, there's different light dart cycles. There's like, it could be a totally different system that it's growing up in. So yeah.
Right. So I should start out by saying I want to believe. I mean, I hope there's aliens out there.
The X-Files.
To meet them someday. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But and I'm not. I don't actually work on this, but there's other people who are studying exoplanets, and they would be the people to talk to. But my own thinking on it is just thinking about the Drake equation is hard to figure out. Each of those 7 or 8 numbers, and But like empirically, if you just look at the Earth, for example, and other planets might be different. But, here, it took a long time for the sun and the Earth to even form. I think you're like 9 billion years into the history of the universe, and, now it's, 4.5 billion years ago. You got the sun and then the Earth formed, around that time. And then I think you go for like 1 billion years with no life.
Yeah.
And then eventually you have, very simple life. Yeah. And then that starts to evolve, and then you have this Cambrian explosion, and you have like all these different species of life. And then you get the dinosaurs, and then they're around for hundreds of millions of years. Yeah. And then they get wiped out, and then finally within the last tens of thousands of years or so, now you've got people. Right. So I wonder if when you're looking around the universe, maybe you see other planets, if they're hospitable to life, in the way that we know it, even, that maybe a lot of them have nothing, just like the Earth did in the beginning for a billion years or so. Maybe a lot of them have like really simple life. Maybe a few have, a bit more evolved, multicellular, and even like little animals and fish swimming around. Maybe if you're super lucky, you find dinosaurs.
Right.
I mean, that's,
like a reptile, something with a lot of mass.
Yeah.
That would take a lot of energy to keep going.
Now, if you find dinosaurs, can you talk to them? I mean, they were around way longer than us, but as far as we know, they weren't like, they didn't have language and libraries and communication. I mean, they communicated. The raptors communicated, right? We all saw Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park.
Very sophisticated social kind of network they had. They seemed to... whatever, the way it was dramatized, at least, is like these clicks, and it's a sophisticated language.
Like some animals on Earth, I guess, and that'd be cool. It'd be super cool to see what other, animals are like. There's so many animals on Earth, if you go down deep in the ocean, or you even just, so it'd be cool to see what animals ended up like on another planet. Hopefully, we'd be nice to them. We're not always nice to animals on this planet, and we gotta hope that we get better at that. Otherwise, the more advanced alien might come and eat us, or not be so nice to us. So I hope that our path is to evolve to be more kind in general to everything. But then you say, are we kind of a fluke? I mean, we sort of needed the dinosaurs to be wiped out. I mean,
there's no Homo sapiens without the asteroid.
Right. I mean, and the dinosaurs make more sense to me, just kind of naively. It's like the most ferocious thing dominated.
Right.
And then that all got wiped out, and you had these, what are they, these kind of rodents, kind of came out, and mammals evolved, and then they got to come out of wherever they were hiding, and, and evolved to be like us. So, I think we might be a fluke. If you think about it, I mean, that's for the most intelligent thing, for the geeks to inherit the Earth, I think is, we still have a lot of those, reptilian, tendencies, and we compete, and that helps, drive innovation, and, but we also have evolved to be, nicer and to be able to think more and communicate, but I don't know, like if you look around the universe, like that might be, I mean, hundreds of millions of years the dinosaurs were here, and they just ruled, uncontested, and for them to get wiped out might be rare. And then how do you know that the most intelligent thing would evolve? There have been other extinctions on the Earth, and as far as we know, it wasn't, some super intelligent species. Makes you wonder a little bit, if something else got wiped out, and we don't know about it, and we hope it doesn't happen to us. But
did you ever see what's called the cosmic calendar?
Yeah, of course.
You overlay the universe on the cosmic calendar, and then wasn't it? So do you know the numbers? It's like, didn't our galaxy show up around like November or something, or October or something?
It was early. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned the distant galaxy we saw like 13.4 billion years ago. We're seeing it.
Yeah.
That's about the same age as our Milky Way, and so you can even think like, on that distant galaxy, like they might have evolved in the same way over the years. Maybe on one of those stars in that galaxy,
right? If
they built space telescopes, they could be looking back at the Milky Way and see it just like that pale infrared dot in their telescopes.
So, if there is life, like, we can't get to it unless we figure out like wormholes or something.
Yeah.
But can we talk? The question is, will we make contact? Because it's so far away. It's really the kind of thing that bums me out sometimes. It may just be too far away.
So if it's within our own galaxy, we have a chance, right? And there's, millions of, hundreds of millions of stars in our own galaxy.
And it's, 100,000 light years across or so?
Yeah, it sounds right. So, I mean, that's still, can we figure out faster than light travel? I mean, hopefully. But, or maybe, does Alpha Centauri have some life? Or, that we can, it still might take a while. I mean, even communicating with a probe on Mars, there's a bit of a delay. And then again, hopefully they're nice and evolved in a good way, as opposed to like that, sort of dinosaur, like, super powerful, just want to destroy everything,
You have such an optimistic, very hopeful, very positive, perspective. But I wonder if there is. Sometimes I get a little dark on these things. Like the other day, I was walking on the beach. I live near the beach where I live in Boston, and I saw 3 people. They were just hanging out on the beach, and they had a dog. And one person was filming the other person with their dog, and they were clearly filming like a TikTok video or something for social media. But the guy was who's behind the dog, and he was holding the dog, and he was making the dog dance by moving its feet, and basically just like abusing this animal, you know, this lower order organism, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why wouldn't an advanced civilization do the same to us?
Yeah.
But, you know, we would mean nothing to them.
Yeah.
If we're like ChatGPT means nothing to us, right?
Yeah.
It's just something that is our little helper. And we say please and thank you, so they won't, like, they'll put us on this, you know, safe list when they take us over. But, like, why would we expect life to be nice to us?
Yeah. To be clear, when I was being hopeful, that was like, we have to hope that we're gonna be better, because we're not that great right now at the way we treat animals. You know, there's this one movie I saw a while back called Earthlings, and it shows all the different animals and species on our planet and how we abuse them. I mean, you know, factory farms and just like the food we eat, and you know, we torture, you know, so many animals. I mean, you know, people torture each other sometimes. I mean, you know, we really need to evolve to be better. You know, I think we're making progress, but yeah, I do absolutely worry that, you know, some alien civilization, you know, if they find us, you know, they would maybe treat us like ants, you know,
right,
or chicken or whatever, you know. But I also feel like we are making a lot of progress as a society. You know, you think about the internet and how we're able to talk to each other and to hear each other's stories. And you know, people can still be cruel, but we can also, I think we've learned that we are being cruel to some people. And because you can hear their accounts like firsthand, and I think we've learned that, you know, we shouldn't, you know, bully each other, and and that we, you know, shouldn't harass women. I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, I think we're just kind of accepted, you know, and I think, you know, we've made a lot of, it still happens, you know, but I think we're making a lot of progress, and I think we need to keep making that progress. And it's, you know, it's painfully hard and slow at times, but you know, I guess I'm hopeful in the sense of, you know, if you think about the cosmic calendar and the, you know, if you think about, in thousands of years we've made a lot of progress. You know, you think about how far humans have come, and we are getting better, and it's, as you're living it on our human time scales, it feels painfully slow at times. You know, but you know, give us another 100 or 1,000 years, and I'm hopeful that we'll.
That's a good point.
Just be nicer.
Yeah, I mean, the cosmic calendar. I think dinosaurs were around for like 6 days in December, and humans are around for like 6 seconds. So we're an extremely young species, you know. And I hope with you, I hope that with evolution, with the development, that we trend toward being more benevolent, and our worst ways don't get the best of us. We don't blow ourselves up. We don't. Or destroy our home.
And when we meet those aliens, that we, you know, learn to be accepting of those differences, you know, and to not just immediately think, you know, they're the other, and I'm scared. And you know, of course, it can be scary, but I hope that we, you know, will embrace them and you know, teach them to love in the way that we love. I mean, I hope that they love. You know, can you imagine, like, do other species love? You know, what do they enjoy? Do they have money? Like, what do they do all day?
I know their form of currency. Yeah, like I saw a video of an elephant. Its like partner, peer, friend had passed away, so it was an elephant that was was deceased.
Yeah.
And the other element was realizing this and trying to, initially revive the elephant, and then realizing that it had passed. And it was so very clear that that elephant was grieving, that elephant was experiencing distress, and it's just so clear that it had the capacity to understand death and to understand that and loss and grief. And that was, if an elephant can do that,
Yeah, my wife is a Shakespeare scholar, and that's what she did her PhD on, was grieving and all of the elaborate rituals we have for that, and that Shakespeare wrote about. I think it's one of the things that we do look for in other species. Just that appreciation of life. I mean, the elephants don't necessarily know that we've evolved from a 13.8 billion year history of the universe, but they still appreciate life. They love. And I hope that's universal.
But to what evidence do we have that it could be? I mean, what if it's just, this is all just so idiosyncratic, like Homo sapiens? It's just unique to the environmental conditions we grew up in, the other organisms we ran into, from bacteria all the way up to, things like dinosaurs. But what if we're just totally unique? Like, what if there's life elsewhere that is completely unimaginable? It's incomprehensible is probably another way of putting it. It's not microbial. Maybe it doesn't have the same building blocks for DNA. And that would create a totally different thing fundamentally. What if it's not a double helix? What if it's a quadruple helix? So there's a lot of possibility.
Other animals love, and you wonder how much of that is there's programming and chemicals and in our evolutionary story that was important even that you would take care of each other, your family, your genetics would do well, and so those are the things that kind of came out on top in a way. I hate to put love in that category, but it was like love wins,
from a practical perspective, child rearing and coming together to rear in order to propagate, our DNA. Love won.
Yeah.
But is love also? Does it have an impractical? Is it not so utilitarian? I don't know.
At times, I suppose there are these kind of edge cases where you need to not love too much, but you think about some other species evolving. It's universal, and that mammals, I think, all, show some sort of love, I think. I mean, I haven't studied that, but I think at least I see it in my cats and dogs and, other animals. You mentioned elephants. So would other but then, maybe not reptiles, right? I mean, there's this sort of, division of they don't have that.
You don't see alligators kind of being affectionate.
Right. So, and then is that connected to being able to develop technology and explore the stars?
Well, cooperation seems to be our...
Right.
I mean, I think that's what allows us to... I mean, you think about the Hubble and JWST, 20,000 people coming together to coordinate and to plan and act all as one, One person couldn't have done that. It really took the coordination of, in this case, tens of thousands of people. And that's what we can do.
It's amazing what we do when we can come together. And, with a lot of things, there's also this kind of layer of competition. There wasn't with JWST. I mean, there was nobody on that team that was, I wasn't on the inside, but, they were all working towards one purpose. I don't think they were competing with each other. So, I don't see alligators building a JWST. I think maybe they just don't have that same level. So, you make a good point. So, love is what enables us to explore the stars. And find out about ourselves. I feel like that was some movie where they said love is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah. I did a podcast on it. Yeah. Well, because it was very interesting to me that one of the astronomers was making a decision of what planet to visit based on her kind of like vague desire to see someone she had loved that she knew went there. So she's like, they only had enough like fuel or energy to get to 2 planets. They had to choose. The data was better on one planet than the other. But Dr. Brand, Anne Hathaway's character, she wanted to go to the other planet that didn't have as good data because that's where the man she loved went. And so one of the really cool scenes is she's kind of explaining like something very unscientific, which is like, I can't explain why we should go to that planet. I'm being drawn there. And then she starts to talk about, well, maybe love is more scientific than we think. Maybe it's an artifact. Maybe it's a form of data that we can't figure out yet. Because I think we've all felt that. It's like, whether it's intuition or whatever, like you're drawn to something for reasons you can't articulate that may not be entirely rational, but maybe it's data on another plane of existence, in another universe, on a parallel universe, but maybe it's something we can't understand yet. And I think that's a really interesting question. And ultimately, they should have chose that because the other planet was data from the astronaut who was faking his data. So she was right. The love that was driving her to visit the planet, the other planet, in an unscientific way of reasoning, she was correct.
So she knew to trust that person.
That's right. And, Matthew McConaughey kind of like opposes her because he's saying, look, you're a scientist. What the hell are you talking about? Like, this is a very unscientific point of view, He's like, love has utility, social rearing, stuff like that. And then she says, we love people who have died. Where's the social utility in that? It's like, gotcha. I don't know. There is none. So I'm just very interested in this. Is it a form of data?
Faking your data is a form of data manipulation. So I mean that as a scientist, I kind of take that away as like, well, they shouldn't have misled me like that. I'd love to believe that love is on some higher dimension. I think sometimes you just have to make tough choices. Whether you love this person and you want to save them versus the experiment. I forget if it was Interstellar or some other movie where the dad is, on the planet for a long time and he's like, carrying out this experiment and the son finally comes to visit him and he's like, Dad, it's time to come home. And the dad's like, no, I gotta work on this experiment and I gotta learn this thing. And I feel like a generation ago, that would have been the hero, the person who sacrifices everything and trying to obtain this scientific result or like whatever it was, sacrificing your family. Whereas his son had a more balanced, view of life and maybe more of a work-life balance, that we all sort of strive for. And he's like, all right, well, you've been working on this thing a long time. You've been away. And I think in that movie, like, he was the hero. It's like a more modern hero where you're not so single-minded and sacrificing everything because there's other things that are important, including family and love.
And the movie Interstellar explored that too. It was the best. They found that the best astronauts were people who had loved ones back home because they would fight to get home. They would have a more powerful survival instinct versus the early missions they sent out were astronauts who were kind of unattached. They didn't have families because they thought that would be more effective. They wouldn't be kind of quote unquote burdened by people back home. They would take bigger risks and they would be detached. But it turns out, this is science fiction, but in that world, it turns out that just having someone who you loved made you want to get home. And we know that. That's a survival instinct. Yeah.
So we need to learn to love AI and have it love us back so that it doesn't take over the ship and fulfill the mission in the wrong way, I think.
You go first. You fall in love. See if your wife's okay with.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of concerns, but otherwise
Very much so.
she might be okay.
Yeah. Well, one question I wanted to ask as we maybe wrap up, we're finishing up our meals here, is like, I remember you said that astronomy helps us appreciate the long arc of history. So I was wondering if you can unpack that. How does looking at the universe give us that perspective?
Yeah, things have taken 13.8 billion years to get to this point, and I'm appreciative. I think it makes us feel small at times, but we've accomplished so much. And progress seems painfully slow at times, but you give it enough time, and I'm hopeful that we'll figure it out.
If you have Hubble, you have JWST, you have Roman coming, there's Euclid, so. I'm curious. If you had a magic wand, what space telescope would you put up there right now? What power, what capacity,
the folks who are deciding those things are doing a great job. Coming up with all these proposals.
Sure.
If we had a magic wand and could build, we would build a much bigger space telescope. The bigger it is, the more distant things you can see and more clarity, and it could cover all wavelengths. So more than anything, if I had a magic wand, I would want to travel faster than light, and I would want to just go.
Because where would you go? Where's the first place you'd go?
First, you go near home. You explore the other planets, you see what those are like.
Check out Saturn.
Oh, yeah.
See the big eye. Go to Jupiter.
Yeah.
And then get out of the solar system and go to Alpha Centauri or...
Yeah, see what planets are hanging out there. And imagine there's a lot of times you see these... There's people discover other planets. I think there's thousands of them now, these exoplanets. And there might be some picture in the press. It's, that people have dramatized what they think it might look like.
Yeah.
Imagine we actually get to go and see another planet.
But it would be very, obviously different conditions. We'd have to be... we'd have to have very sophisticated spacesuits, and we'd figure out radiation.
I'm fine, yeah.
We're still in the magic wand world.
Magic wand, so I'm going there.
Yeah.
And then, see the other stars and the planets and everything. And then I would, shake that magic wand a few more times so that I could go even faster and I could get up above the Milky Way and see what that looks like.
Yeah, sure.
Because we have some ideas, but you can't, fully see what our own galaxy is. We've seen, millions of other galaxies out there, and we have a decent idea what ours looks like. But I just saw recently there's a new image that came out from Gaia, which has mapped the positions of, I think it's hundreds of millions of stars in our galaxy, and there's like a tilt to the Milky Way. There's like this bend at the edges of the disk, that I don't think people had realized before. How many spiral arms does it have? How symmetric is it? Or, what are all the little, things on it?
Yeah, I'm gonna say something crazy. I wouldn't mind flying into a black hole.
Yeah.
I think it's like inevitable death. Maybe I'll do it at the end of my life, so that I'd live a long, full life. But I think, doesn't the physics say we'd be sort of just stretched to an unimaginable? We'd just be absolutely oblitterated. But okay, what's going on in there?
Oh yeah. Well, you first. Yeah, I think.
I know.
Maybe we can send something in there, or when I was a kid, one of the things I thought is I want to be like the first person on Mars or whatever. And yeah, it'd be great to explore. But then you think about it, and it's after a while, it might be visiting, some rocky desert or something, and it's cool,
place. Yeah.
But after a while, I definitely want to see it. But and so going into a black hole, you'd almost certainly just be, stretched out and killed long before you ever got, into the middle of it. But if we have our magic wand and we kind of figure out that's one of the biggest mysteries. This one talk I heard in an astronomy conference, they said, well, what if every black hole creates a new universe?
Right.
They were talking about the problem of entropy, needs to, not increase, and that's one way to solve it. And like, so the multiverse is like each black hole is a new universe, and presumably our universe is from another black hole. And so, can you go in there and explore the other universe? And are they all a bit different? I mean, our universe, seems just right in a lot of ways for us. Maybe there's others that are totally different.
You once said only when it's dark can we see the stars. I think you meant that literally, but figuratively as well.
Also.
What do you mean by that?
We, for JWST, we had to launch it 1 million miles into space. There was a giant sun shield that blocked out the light and the heat from the sun and the Earth. And only when it's darkest could we see the most distant stars that we can see, 13 billion years in the past. But also figuratively, I mean, it's only when it's darkest that we see what we're made of, and we're made of stars, So whenever you're, feeling down about yourself or our place in the universe, you can realize that we shine super bright, and that we are part of this whole 13.8 billion year story that we've built up over this whole time, and now we're able to actually do all these things and look back and figure out what we're made of. I mean, that's what keeps me going every day.
Yeah. So I like to ask, all scientists about the scientific process and the role of failure in it. Science is often about failure, right? It's trial, error, it's learning from missteps and wrong turns. You've spoken about embracing failure as part of discovery, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and share your perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we've all heard famously that, failure was not an option for, going to the moon or for JWST. I mean, there's certain things that, had to work, but then there's a lot of other things where it doesn't matter as much. If I find a distant galaxy and it turns out not to be so far away, like, that's interesting. Like, we're learning about something. Or
not a failure, just a redirection.
I mean, that's how we learn. We make mistakes. That's how a lot of scientific discoveries have been made over the years. I'll even mention, like, I mentioned I was fortunate. I got to see one of the first JWST images, before it was released. It was the Webb's first deep field. So all these little dots in the image. And there's this one galaxy in particular that caught my eye that had these little dots in it. And I thought, wow, it's like this burst of star formation in the early universe, and I called it a cosmic spring, And you see, it's like, this birth in the early universe. We got our press team on it, and they kind of wrote about all this. Turns out I was wrong. These were actually very old star clusters. So when people actually analyzed it, they found that they were billions of years old already. This was, I think it was 9 billion years ago, and they were already billions of years old, which kind of makes more sense. We weren't seeing this galaxy at this special time for all this burst of star formation, although that could happen, but these were in place. So these are some of the earliest star clusters. And we've been seeing that further and further back in time. When we look within our own galaxy, we see these old star clusters. We see some are young and some are old. We see some of them date back over 13 billion years. This cluster of stars that formed so long ago, and it's just persisted to the present day. Well, now finally, with JWST, and especially combined with lensing, we're able to go back and see distant star clusters 13 billion years ago. And we measured them, and we can tell they're already entrenched, and they're going to persist. So, this is a huge leap towards discovering the first stars with JWST, is that, we're seeing some of the first star clusters. It's not even the first galaxies, but the first star clusters. We're getting down to individual stars in some cases. But yeah, I still like the name Cosmic Spring. I named my team after it, and and it also is sort of a nod to the scientific process that we get stuff wrong, and we should be humble about it, and that, in the past there were, and there still are, a lot of big egos, sometimes, wanting to get things right, but I kind of love embracing, getting things wrong, and because that's when you learn, and that's fun.
But then you hear, like at the paradigm level, is where maybe some scientists have trouble changing their minds. Isn't the famous quote about like, professors at academic institutions, they have to kind of die for the science to upgrade or evolve. They have to.
I don't know. I hadn't heard that one.
You have to let go of a whole paradigm sometimes.
I mean, that's true of a lot of things. We were talking about how things kind of move too slowly sometimes. I think it's like one of the 5 big personality traits is open-mindedness.
Yeah.
And so, I wonder if, science, sort of prefers a closed mind. Normally I don't think so.
It depends on the research.
Okay.
Like, wouldn't you say like basic fundamental research, that would take a high degree of open-mindedness, don't you think? It's very curiosity-driven.
Yeah, I think, and again, maybe it's an ego thing. I don't know, where people kind of, they figure something out and then they want it to be right. Whereas, to me, it seems, I don't know, maybe a bit more scientific to just, go where the data takes you and, there's so much we don't know. And that was, one of the most interesting things that we're studying is, what is dark matter, dark energy? I mean, we've kind of made up these things to, quantify our ignorance. And so one of the very first results that came out from JWST was that there were the few galaxies that seemed to be impossibly big, like early in the universe. And this was, I think it was like a week or two after the first data started coming out. And then there were tons of headlines about how JWST broke the universe. And these things were impossibly big, and we must be on the cusp of figuring out, like, something to do with dark energy, or the whole, our whole understanding of the universe was broken. It turns out those galaxies just weren't really that massive.
Okay.
We got better data, and some of them weren't that distant or so early in the universe after all.
You just got more accurate.
Yeah, and people realized, like, oh, there's actually a supermassive black hole that's burning bright, and so we thought that was stellar mass, but it's actually this jet that we is kind of mistaken one thing for the other. But that took a lot of the oxygen out of the whole conversation about what are we learning about the early universe, and it also just kind of is contrary to the whole scientific method, where the reality is that science works. Because I think it's dangerous actually when people start to think like, well, these scientists say one thing one day and then something else the next day, and they don't really know, so now we're not going to necessarily trust them when we say to take certain medicine or whatever, So I think, there's a lot we don't know, and there's some things there's a lot of things we can maybe, get wrong sometimes, but there's a lot of things that we are confident about because that's, the scientific method. And so, the whole history of the universe, we've been measuring it, more and more precisely over the years. We don't know what dark matter and dark energy are, but we know basically that the universe has evolved along a certain timeline. So for the most part, you can't just, you don't just throw out all the old data because you got a shiny new telescope. I mean, all the old stuff still, we're building on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
It just, you talk about how exciting scientific discovery can be. We got these data, this galaxy that I discovered, 10 years earlier, and we were finally seeing it for the first time. And my student, Tiger Shao, was giving a talk at the American Astronomical Society conference like the next day. We're getting our data on a Sunday, and he's got a talk scheduled for Monday. And we were fortunate; the data were coming in.
Yeah.
But normally I say, we shouldn't, work on the weekends or after hours. But sometimes you get super excited and you just want to dive in. And this was one of those times. And so we got the data. Our colleague Gabe Brammer reduced it really quickly, and he sent it to us. And it was like, all right, we got your spectrum. But we don't see any lines that tell us about the elements, And at first glance, that seemed about right. But my colleague Rebecca Larson, she's a very experienced spectroscopist. She was like, I know there's lines there, But we were busy. There was like, people milling about, and we were about to go out for dinner and drinks or whatever. So we put it aside. Later that night, she goes back to it, and she cracks it. Like she had to try a bunch of different things, but eventually she's like, here you go. You've got hydrogen, you've got carbon, you've got oxygen, you've got neon. And, so she sent it around,
We gave it to Tiger. He quickly incorporated it into his talk that he was given the next day. We were scrambling a bit, but he gave it. It was a great talk. The people were excited to see it. And I told him, I was like, it's never going to get more exciting than this. I mean, this is as good as it could get. We're getting these great data. We're racing to put it in. It's just that thrill of seeing something for the first time, that you're learning about it, and you want to share it quickly with everybody. But for a brief moment, like you're the only people that know this fact about the universe, or about this little corner of it.
Yeah, you're right. It probably will never go as fast like that again. You get the data, you interpret it, analyze it. It's a good finding, and then you present it to your scientific colleagues.
And a lot of times that's kind of painfully slow too. I mean, we're very meticulous about making sure that we get things right, and we write the paper, and it kind of takes a while. And but every once in a while, some things are just kind of really clear, and you can get them out there quick.
Yeah. What does it mean? So you can look 90% of the way back to the beginning, 13.5.
Yeah, 98.
So 98. Yeah. What's 100 mean? Mm-hmm. Like, what's that mean? And what does it mean to go beyond that? Like, are we just looking at a dot? Are we looking at nothingness?
Can we look back and see ourselves, or the fold in? So, that's right. It's a really interesting question. So, we'll be able to push that back maybe to 99%. And at some point, we'll run out of galaxies and stars.
Right. So then it'll just be dark.
Right.
Okay.
So then, what if you could maybe wave your magic wand and you could have like the biggest telescope you could possibly imagine. It's as big as the Milky Way, and you could really just see everything there is to see. Well, I mean, at some point, the age of the universe is what it is, and
it's fine now.
Could you see the Big Bang?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, so there's no more stars, but and for a while there's just no light.
There's an explosion.
Right. So, but then there's the cosmic microwave background. Is this time where
I've seen that image.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, there was all these particles whizzing around. You got your protons, electrons, and photons, particles of light. And then some neutrinos and other things. But let's focus on those three. So the protons and electrons want to get together and form atoms.
Okay.
But there's all these photons zipping around.
Sorry, this is after the Big Bang happens, or just after?
Just after the Big Bang.
Okay.
So we got our protons and our electrons. They want to attract and form an atom.
Got it.
Every time they form an atom, a photon comes along and knocks them apart. And they keep forming. It keeps knocking them apart. They just can't get together for the life of them. So finally, the universe is expanding, and it cools to the point where now you're about 300,000 years in. And now, as the universe cools, the photons they're light waves, and they're being stretched into the redder part of the spectrum. That's how come we also have to build an infrared telescope. It's because this light is all being stretched out to redder wavelengths.
The redshifts.
Yeah. So it's also just it's losing energy, and so after 300,000 years, these photons aren't knocking the atoms apart anymore. They'll knock into it, and they don't have enough energy. So now
they can stay married.
Yeah. So now finally, the protons, electrons are able to get together, and the photons quit blocking them. And now the light all kind of streams free over a relatively short time, and that's what we see imprinted on this cosmic microwave background. And so we're seeing these photons. Some of them are from these regions where it's maybe a little bit more dense, or some where it's a little bit less dense, and we're actually able to see those sort of ripples, those splotches that we see are from that. So that is the earliest light that we can possibly see.
300,000 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you say, well, how could you see before that?
Right.
Which, by the way, already being able to see that early is phenomenal. And to see anything in between that, would be amazing. But now you say, well, can you see past that veil? In order to do that, you might need something like neutrinos, which do pass through all of that. And now you're talking about like a neutrino telescope, but the neutrinos would go right through it, and so what would you even see? I mean, I don't know. This is getting.
So maybe we just need a new kind of telescope.
I mean, we're so far, before the point where we can even think about, we need a huge telescope, and we're still at the point we're trying to see the first stars, much less beyond the veil of the CMB.
But you're saying maybe not with JWST do we get to the point of of it all, the origin of the universe?
I hope so.
The singularity, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, that's about as much as I've thought of that. Maybe other people have thought about it more, but in principle, can you see back further? I mean, I want to believe, that we'll figure out someday where we all came from, or maybe we won't, and it's like, I think you even had in your story how there's this scientist who's been working on this stuff for all these years, and they don't quite figure it out, and they're wondering if it all, was worthwhile. I sure think so. That because we're learning all these interesting things along the way.
Yeah, it's not like it's time wasted.
Yeah,
some really exciting things happening.
Yeah.
As you work.
Right. It's like my student talks about so what do you want to work on? Well, finding the first galaxies. It's like, well, yeah. And it's hard. It's like saying you want to win the Nobel Prize or something. I mean, it's hard to kind of set out and do that. Although, you can certainly build things to try to find the first galaxies, but there's a lot of luck involved in that, and it might not happen. So you should build something where you have a chance of finding that. And this helps you write a good proposal too, by the way. You have a good chance of, you have some chance of maybe doing something spectacular, but you're also definitely going to do a lot of great things with your science along the way.
Do you think that, guys like me from the media, journalists, like we tend to focus on holy grails. We tend to focus on magic bullets. But it's, science is a little bit more granular. It's like less dramatic, it's smaller questions, it's incremental progress, It's not like what happens after before the Big Bang. It's like, let's find the next star. Yeah,
a lot of times it's that way, but it's also, you're getting a lot of pretty pictures and interesting results, and some of those details about some corner of the universe can be really interesting. I mean, and not everything changes our fundamental, understanding of everything, and but there is that desire and that hope, especially when folks are writing about it or asking me about it. So but didn't those galaxies break the universe? And I said, well, no, sorry. I mean, there's other interesting things that aren't that interesting, but we always want to dramatize it a bit more. It's like being a tourist. Hopefully there's interesting things you can see along the way.
For sure. It's possible that early junior scientists may be listening to this. People may be even thinking, should they get into science, like a high school student or something? People may be thinking about leaving science, especially in the current climate. What advice do you have to young scientists and people thinking about science? You clearly are in the right spot. You clearly enjoy and are satisfied and fulfilled by your work. What advice do you give to junior people?
Yeah, it's I like I said, I feel super fortunate I get to work in this. It can be a tough decision at times to really pursue this. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do science, even astronomy. Because we have so much data, and there's a lot of different ways to get involved. To do it at this level, you go to college. I used to say you go to grad school next. Sometimes now there's like a post-bac. You might do a year in between to build even more experience. After grad school might be, 5 years. Then you do some postdocs, maybe 3 years each. You do 2 of those, and then maybe you get a job somewhere if you're lucky.
In your mid-40s.
Right. And so some people might not want to go that route. You might want to do something else. I will say that along the way is some of the most fun and interesting times. Where you just get to focus on science. And sometimes I reminisce and kind of wish I could go back to those days where you just focus on science. And of course, I have more responsibilities now, which is good in a different way.
Yeah.
But it's a long road. But if you're enjoying it along the way, it's great. And there's also a lot of things you can do. Like if you get your degree, or if you go to grad school and you do it, and then you can always decide you want to go do something else. Yeah. And the skills that you build doing this kind of thing are sought after in a lot of industries. So you could decide to do this for a while and go do something else. When I think, in a lot of industries, there isn't the same idea of working at one place for your whole career, for better or worse, So you might do it while you're enjoying it, and then, you can go do something else. The other thing I'll say is people used to say that, I'm not good at math, and so I can't do your job. And I say, well, I don't do a lot of math. There's other people who have worked out a lot of the more detailed equations, and I've done that kind of thing in the past, but nowadays I don't do a lot of math. I do a lot of coding, so that's a useful tool to have. But I will say that nowadays, I think we won't need to code for much longer. I mean, I think AI has gotten really good at it. It's probably about halfway there. I use it a lot to help out, either writing from scratch or helping as I go. So I wonder now with my current students, obviously it's useful to know how to code and to go to the telescope and to learn, all these things and what they entail and get that appreciation for it. But I also wonder if, in a few years, if, students won't need to code. Because we kind of expect it nowadays. We're like, well, you need to code in order to do astronomy. But that hasn't always been the case. I mean, you go back 50 years or 100 years, astronomy is all about, observing, problem solving, critical thinking, and so those attributes will still make for a great astronomer, even if we don't have to code. So if you have that passion for it, we're, always looking for, bright students to come along, and we have so much work to do.
I've heard of, have you thought about gamification of science? I've heard of some scientists released some protein folding data on the internet, and they basically invited the public to play, and they turned complicated science into a game almost. I wonder if you could gamify some of the analysis that's going to go on some of these images. Just release it and let people treat it like a hobby, like a sport. Could be.
Yeah, so Galaxy Zoo was, I think, the first ones who did that. So people have gone through and looked at little, stamps of images, from large surveys. And they see a galaxy, and they were asked to classify it in some certain way. And there's been so many iterations of this now, I haven't really kept up. But the public is absolutely, and they've discovered things. Green peas were a type of galaxy that we didn't know about before. And it's this really compact galaxy that's going through an intense burst of star formation, so intense that it's lighting up oxygen, doubly ionized, so in terms of energizing the electrons and ionizing them. And that's the main thing you see. It's just this one wavelength, and it's green, and it's at 5,000 angstroms. And that's the whole galaxy. It's this really compact thing. And that was, found by people just going through these large images, because there aren't that many of them. But they are there, every once in a while. And so it took a lot of people looking a lot to find them. And they are actually pretty good analogs of what we're seeing in the distant universe. When you talk about a small galaxy with intense star formation, that's a lot of the galaxies that we see, 13 billion years ago. So it's really helped, us understand the more distant universe.
You could do anything with your life, and you're asking fundamental questions about the nature of reality, the origins of our universe, the origins of life. Why? It's is it that just the way you put together? Are you inquisitive? Is it a temperament? You seem like you're just locked in. This is what you should be doing, and you're doing it.
I'm very fortunate that way. Thanks.
Yeah.
But we are all scientists. We're all exploring the world curiously. I think we all, hypothesize and we test things out and we learn about the world. I love it, so much that I, made a whole career out of it. And I want to, understand how the world works and, explain it to people. So I think most people probably in most jobs have some of this where they kind of, explore things and figure it out. But I do love, just contributing to our knowledge and discovering things, and it's a lot of fun. It's not for everybody. People do all sorts of interesting things, but if you're excited by this, you can have a go at it.
I always wondered about this. You know, there's theoretical physicists, theoretical scientists. You're like, I guess, doing a lot of math. You're calculating. You're not doing what you're doing, which is looking at imagery. You know, you're capturing images and that our eyes can see and be delighted by and can analyze. You know, you're obviously doing a lot of theory in the background, yes, of course. But like, did you ever have like if you want to be a theory scientist versus like I don't know, I think about astronomers as people who, you know, you look and see. You're not cracking equations on a notepad, so to speak, all day, you know? Is there a split there?
Yeah, I think, you know, at some point I thought I wanted to help, you know, figure out the theory of everything. And, you know, when I was a grad student, I was, you know, I think my thesis was about, you know, towards an understanding of dark matter. I was using this gravitational lensing effect to map out the dark matter in the galaxy cluster, which is pretty cool to be able to see this hidden part of the universe. Now I use it to magnify the distant universe and study these distant galaxies with JWST. But one analogy I've thought of is, you know, the show Scrubs, and they have the surgeons and the doctors, and they kind of, you know, talk about the jocks and the geeks kind of. And, I don't normally think about myself as a jock, but in this case, you know, I kind of feel like I'm going out there, I'm getting the data, you know, and then, you know, somebody smart is going to help me explain what's in there, you know, some theorist. And I mean, I think, you know, we all, you know, specialize, you know, so much on like each part of our job. You know, I've gotten good at designing observations and writing proposals and, you know, discovering things, you know, and then other people are good at other parts. And, you know, and even with the stuff that I look at, you know, distant galaxies, and then I have so many other colleagues who, you know, can explain, you know, help explain the spectra to me or the stars. I have other colleagues who say, what are you studying galaxies for? You don't even understand stars yet, you know, and they're right. There's a lot of things that, you know, a lot of things we do know about them, of course, and, you know, people have learned, but there's some of these details that really matter, especially when it comes to these supermassive stars in the early universe, with less of the heavy elements. There aren't that many of them, even around here, that we can study. So, it's, you know, it really takes everybody, you know, contributing in all these different ways. But,
you know, another way you contribute is by communicating. Scientific research. You know, you've been in the media, and I've seen your interviews online, and you know, TV, radio, podcasts. You know, it's one thing to just talk to the scientific community. It's another thing to make your science accessible to the public in order to like increase awareness about certain things. And you know, you're doing that too. What do you think about science communication and popularization?
This part is really fun. I mean, that's one of the parts I love most. And thanks. I've gotten to do a bit of it. I think I do a decent job. You know, there's other folks who do even better. You know, there's Dr. Becky Smethurst and Ethan Siegel, I think, are two of the astronomers doing some of the best, you know, reporting, you know, because they are astronomers, and so they're in it, and then they're also, you know, communicating it with everybody else on YouTube or in articles. So, and I turn to them when I'm trying to, you know, understand, you know, some of the latest news or things that have come out. But, you know, I'm happy to do it I love doing it from time to time when I get a chance, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I am at the end of my questions. We're at the end of our meal. You know, this has just been pretty much a fascinating morning. I can't tell you how thankful I am that you invited me into your work and you you know, gave me time to talk about this. You're a super interesting guy and super kind guy, and I just love your attitude. And I can't say thank you enough.
That's very kind. I appreciate that. It's been really great talking to you. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope everybody enjoys this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Curiously. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with astronomer Dan Coe. If this episode challenged you or helped expand your perspective or satisfy your curiosity about the world, please consider sharing it with your friends and family and use it to have a conversation of your own. If you want to support Curiously, please consider leaving a review. They encourage people to listen and help attract great guests. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for more conversations with people I meet along the way.